Hi, real quick before we jump in today, I recently received a heartfelt message from Jack Anderson, Nancy's brother, and I wanted to share the corrections and additions that he provided to Nancy's life and her story. I feel like it's important to honor Nancy's memory accurately, and I deeply appreciate Jack's willingness to share these details. While it was previously mentioned that Nancy played the guitar, and had aspirations of studying business or running her own company, Jack clarified that this wasn't the case. Nancy was passionate about singing and had a strong interest in acting. Nancy's parents were Merle and Thelma Anderson. At the time of Nancy's tragic murder, the Anderson family was actually living in Arvada, Colorado, having moved there 6 months earlier from Bay, Michigan. The distinction is important as some sources simplified the story by omitting their recent move. Jack explained that the timing of the photo of Nancy falling, which had been associated with her murder, aligns with that timing because they were in Colorado and not Michigan. I also wanted to share that Jack shared with me he had written a book called The Brittle Riddle, which delves into Nancy's story and their family journey. All proceeds from this book benefit DNA Justice, which is a nonprofit helping law enforcement solve difficult cases while providing support to victims' family. We'll provide a link to the book and a link so that you can explore DNA Justice. Jack has also created a Facebook page dedicated to Nancy's memory and their family story. It's a platform to learn more and keep Nancy's legacy alive, which I will also link. Jack expressed gratitude for how Nancy's story has been covered, and hopefully we will have a follow-up with him to explore more about Nancy's life and their family journey. In the meantime, enjoy part 2 of Nancy Anderson. Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
Today we're diving into part 2 of Nancy Anderson's case. When we spoke last, we talked about her growing up in Michigan and moving to Hawaii. We covered what happened to her on that awful day in January of 1972. We talked about the investigation and how even though detectives followed every lead they could find, we still don't have answers for her family. If you haven't listened to part 1, please go listen to that first because we're going to dive right in. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Can't wait to find out how they solve this 50 years later.
Yeah, me either.
It's such a long time. For Nancy's family, time obviously did not heal all wounds. Instead, it deepened the void she left behind. But even as they faced decades of silence, they never stopped believing that one day the truth would come to light. What they didn't know was that the key to solving Nancy's case had thankfully been preserved all along, hidden in the smallest fragments of evidence, waiting for technology to catch up and serve justice. Time has a way of eroding evidence and dimming memories, but in some cases, it also brings progress. For Nancy Anderson, progress came in the form of a new generation of detectives who refused to let her story remain buried in the past and our advancements of technology. At this point, her case has been cold for nearly 3 decades. In February 2001, so exactly 29 years after Nancy's murder, her mother passed away at the age of 75. She had spent nearly 3 decades longing for answers, but heartbreakingly, they never came in her lifetime.
That's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine the heartbreak of never knowing.
Never finding out and always hoping and having that hope and nothing.
Mm-hmm. And, by 2000, we do have advancements in DNA and technology, but Unfortunately, she never got to hear these answers. Later in 2001, in July, Nancy's family reached out to the Honolulu Police Department to request that her case be reopened. To their pleasant surprise, the department agreed. Nancy's murder was now their oldest case under active investigation, and they did have a cold case now, and so it was assigned to one of their cold case detectives. The detective meticulously reviewed all the original case files and recovered specific items from evidence storage. In 1972, the technology for analyzing blood was limited to determining blood type. However, the original investigators had shown remarkable foresight. They had carefully preserved the evidence, keeping it safe and free from contamination for decades.
That's amazing. It's so great that they did that. They must have just been hoping one day something would come up that could solve this. So that's great that they did that.
Absolutely. It always is heartbreaking to hear about police departments that get flooded or burned down. They have all this evidence carefully stored.
Oh, that would be horrible.
Right?
I can't imagine that happening if, you were waiting for one of your loved ones' cases to be solved. And then to find out that happens, that would be heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Modern DNA analysis had advanced by this point. Using the bloodstained towels recovered from the crime scene, investigators had obtained a DNA sample. It revealed the presence of an unknown male's blood, a discovery that finally offered a new avenue of hope in solving Nancy's murder. In 2003, investigators took a bold step in their pursuit of justice. They tracked down every man who had been interviewed in connection with Nancy's case decades earlier. Mike, the knife salesman, everyone else like Reno, Nevada, the man that we called Will, all of them. Each of these men were asked to provide a DNA sample. At this time, the process sometimes took 6 months or longer due to the challenge of locating, obtaining cooperation, and then it just was still a really long process in 2003, I mean. Despite their efforts, none of the samples matched the unknown male DNA found on the evidence. Investigators turned to CODIS, the National DNA Database, hoping for a breakthrough. With the sheer brutality of Nancy's murder, they believed the killer might have a criminal history. By this point, at least, that would lead to a match, but there was none. How could someone commit such a violent crime and then seemingly vanish, leaving no trace over decades? Investigators began to wonder, had the man responsible died, or how had he avoided detection all this time? With no further leads, Nancy's case was placed back into pending status by the end of 2003. For the Anderson family, this was another painful setback, but Nancy's brother Jack was not ready to give up. He really enjoyed watching television programs that explored the emerging field of genetic genealogy, where adopted children and birth parents were finding each other through DNA testing. The concept fascinated him, planting a seed of hope that this technology could be the key to solving Nancy's case. And I find this interesting after Christine Frankie's case, because in 2018, the Anderson family had a reunion in Florida, and Jack shared his thoughts with his relatives. And I couldn't find exactly when in 2018, but that was the year that they announced the arrest of Benjamin Holmes with Christine Frankie in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe on a news station down there or something, because this is such a good tie back, but he had even heard of C.C. Moore, who was the one that did Parabon Labs DNA genetic genealogy. So while they were at the reunion, he told his family members about investigative genetic genealogy, the groundbreaking approach to solving cases by building family trees based on DNA profiles. The process involved taking a genetic sample and matching it with distant relatives to work backward toward identifying an individual. Jack believed this new technique could give investigators a new lead in Nancy's case. At the time, the Honolulu Police Department had never used this kind of technology. Their forensic labs weren't equipped to produce the detailed genetic profiles needed for this kind of DNA matching. But the Anderson family's renewed hope and Jack's discovery sparked the possibility of breathing new life into a case that had gone cold for far too long.
So this was 15 years after they closed it for the second time.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. We're at 46 years now.
Oh, wow.
Detective Michael McCormick, who led the review, described the file as a time capsule of tragedy, Reports from the 1970s detailed the frantic early days of the investigation, the long list of dead-end leads, and the growing frustration as the case went cold. Tucked into those aging pages was the key to solving this mystery: their preserved biological evidence. The preserved blood samples were a miracle in their own right. In the 1970s, no one could have anticipated the advent of DNA technology. And like we've said, these investigators had incredible foresight. They collected, they stored them meticulously. Though a little bit degraded by time, the samples were still viable enough for modern analysis, a testament to the importance of even the smallest fragments of evidence.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to keep them for that long, stored that perfectly.
Yeah, 46 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's good that no one decided, well, this case has been closed twice. Let's move on.
Yes.
It's nice that they saved it, even though it had been a cold case for so long.
Yeah.
And that, so many of those years before, they had no idea what they'd be able to do with it.
Exactly.
In early 2019, Nancy's brother Jack took a proactive step in the family's decades-long search for answers. He reached out to CeCe Moore, the expert in genetic genealogy that worked Christine Franke's case. And he sent her a heartfelt message. He shared the details of Nancy's case, explaining the police had preserved a strong DNA sample from the killer, but had yet to find a match. He emphasized the family's ongoing hope for resolution, and he mentioned different news outlets where the story had been shared so she could look into it as well. To Jack's surprise, CeCe responded quickly, actually the same day, with great empathy. She expressed her deep sympathy for the Anderson family's loss and her admiration for their resilience. CeCe shared her willingness to work with investigators on Nancy's case, noting her excitement about the opportunity to bring genetic genealogy on such a challenging investigation. However, she acknowledged potential complexities, including the unique challenges of working with Pacific Islander DNA, which can make tracing ancestry more difficult. CeCe later remarked that it was uncommon for families to reach out to her directly, but Jack's message and the Anderson family's determination deeply moved her. This personal connection made her even more committed to helping uncover the truth about Nancy's murder. In a sterile lab far from the beaches of Waikiki, scientists carefully extracted DNA from the blood. The process was delicate, requiring advanced techniques to ensure no contamination. When the results finally came through, they revealed something extraordinary: a full genetic profile of Nancy's killer.
Wow.
Right? After all those years. By 2019, scientists were able to construct a detailed profile of Nancy's murderer. The results revealed a man with fair to very fair skin, brown or hazel eyes. His ancestry was traced to southern and southeastern Europe, specifically Romania and Italy. Additional details included an estimated age of about 25 at the time of the crime, an average build with a body mass index of 22, and facial features consistent with these traits.
That's amazing that they can get that from that sample.
Yes. So I want to show you the picture of what they constructed and what he looked like at the time. You can see the side by side, and we'll post that on our blog.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Right? Isn't that so cool?
That's really cool that they have that technology.
That's interesting. The one that seems weird to me is even knowing his BMI. There's just so much information that they pulled from there.
Yeah, and I don't remember hearing a BMI on Christine Franke's case.
Yeah, I don't either.
The level of confidence in these findings was remarkable: an 82% confidence in the skin tone prediction, a 99% certainty that his skin wasn't dark brown or darker. Eye color analysis concluded with 97% confidence that his eyes were not green, blue, or black. This genetic fingerprint offered a striking representation of the suspect, providing investigators and the public with an image of what the person would have looked like in 1972. The investigation took a major turn when CeCe Moore began narrowing her search. Armed with the suspect's predicted physical traits and the Southern European lineage, half Romanian, half Italian, she meticulously combed through the 1972 Honolulu City Directory for surnames matching these origins. It was a painstaking process that required her to work methodically and In the People magazine Investigates, they interview her. It's really interesting to hear her talk about this and to see her lab and everything. She mentioned that it took forever just to get to names beginning with a C.
Oh, wow.
Question. When detectives interview people, do they like take pictures of all of the suspects or no? I don't know what that process looks like, but if you're interviewing someone, do you get a picture of them or no?
I'm not entirely sure.
I just feel like that would have been helpful.
Yeah, because you could see if he looked like anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the 1970s, probably not, would be my guess. But now, at least, most interviews are recorded.
That's what I was
So-
thinking.
Yeah, that's true.
Might have it now, but
Right. but
Yeah,
maybe not
probably
back then.
probably not back then.
Yeah. I'll research that though. Good question. So by the time she got to the C's, one name immediately stood out. Tudor Chirila, born on April 15th, 1945. His Romanian heritage on his father's side and Italian lineage on his mother's aligned perfectly with the DNA profile. Photos of Tudor further validated the findings as his physical traits were strikingly consistent with the predictions from the snapshot phenotyping. At the time of Nancy's murder, Tudor Chirila was living just 2.4 miles away from her apartment with his wife, whose name was Mara Lee. A highly educated man, he held a Master's of Arts degree from the University of Hawaii, where he was working currently in 1972, as a teaching assistant. By 1977, he had earned a law degree in California, and by 1980, he was practicing law in Nevada. Tudor also had 3 children, 1 son and 2 daughters. His professional trajectory was impressive. He served as a deputy attorney general in Nevada, a role that placed him at the heart of the state's legal affairs. His responsibilities included representing the state in complex legal matters, and his performance earned him respect among his peers.
I'm just thinking, like, if he is the killer,
Yeah,
all these like accomplishments and things that he's doing, and
being a lawyer.
yeah, it just doesn't make sense with what he did to Nancy.
Question. Was he from Nevada originally? Like Reno, Nevada? Is that this guy?
That's what I wondered. They don't connect the two.
Interesting.
But I did find that interesting. I don't
Yeah.
think he had lived in Reno prior.
Okay, I just was curious.
Yeah.
Did he have 3 kids at the time in 1972, or when they're looking at him like now he has 3 kids?
No, it was later
Okay.
now. Well, not,
Not now,
well, but
yeah.
yes. Yes, in 2018, 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. In 1994, he aspired to ascend to the Nevada Supreme Court, launching a campaign that highlighted his legal acumen and his commitment to justice. Although unsuccessful, this endeavor underscored his ambition and desire to shape the judicial landscape.
And to bring justice to people. Interesting.
Yeah.
all of us
Interesting.
are just like shaking our heads here.
Colleagues and acquaintances described Chirila as intelligent and articulate, yet some noted an undercurrent of arrogance. His legal prowess was undeniable, but his associations suggested a comfort with the fringes of these legal systems. The duality made him a perplexing figure, one who could argue the finer points of law by day and engage with morally ambiguous ventures by night. This background made Tudor, on the surface, an unlikely suspect for such a brutal crime. However, a deeper dive into his history revealed some disturbing patterns of behavior. Tudor had a criminal record that included jail time for refusing to pay over $30,000 in child support to his ex-wife.
Oh, goodness.
Even more troubling was an arrest for kidnapping and assaulting a girlfriend when he was 50 years old. Police reports detailed that he became enraged when she attempted to end their relationship. Tudor restrained her by taping her hands, legs, and mouth with packing tape and holding her down, threatening her with scissors to kill her if she moved.
Oh, so scary.
When we talk about his fringe legalities, he was
Not
associated.
fringe.
Yeah. Well,
That's
there's more.
illegal.
There's more. He was associated with the Mustang Ranch, a notorious legal brothel in Nevada, allegedly run by a notorious mobster. Serving as president of the corporation linked him to this establishment. He navigated the murky waters of the legal and ethical boundaries in keeping them afloat and kind of being the catch man, I guess, for a lot of this.
I'm kind of glad he didn't make it to the Supreme Court of
Yeah.
Nevada.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been the year before what happened with the girlfriend. He tried to run for Supreme Court in 1994. What happened with the girlfriend was in 1995.
Wow.
The connection to Mustang Ranch and then his legal history painted a complex picture of a man who had shadowed kind of conventional respect and controversial enterprises. Finding these revelations about him painted a darker picture. And at first glance, he had seemed really far removed from suspicion and like it didn't make sense. And maybe they needed to keep going through that book to find other connections. But finding the additional, legal background and everything,
Yeah.
it now felt like a promising lead. Unfortunately, there were no strong matches to Tudor in GEDmatch. So we talked about last time or on our last case, centimorgans of DNA and how you need a few hundred to even be like a third cousin, right? Or a second cousin. So the closest match in GEDmatch shared 69.7 centimorgans, and the second closest match shared just 34.
So nothing close to him at all.
Right. We can't really build that family tree.
Yeah.
His proximity to the crime, his matching traits, and his criminal history, though, helped investigators make the decision to look into him. They were initially skeptical when Cece Moore presented his name as a lead, and especially when she said that she had found him in the city directory. After all, they had spent nearly 50 years investigating this case without finding him. While intrigued, they approached the lead with cautious optimism as they began digging into his background. What they found raised more questions than answers. Tudor and Nancy seemed to have nothing in common. They were different ages, they came from different backgrounds, they had no clear connection. There was no evidence suggesting that they had ever crossed paths. And while one could speculate that they might have met at the beach or at the McDonald's where Nancy worked, there was no proof to support the theory. And also, he was married at the time. Not that that's preventing him from committing crimes, but they probably wouldn't be meeting
To hang out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless she was having an affair with him.
Or him with her.
Right. Yeah.
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 I mean,
It's
you
not
never know.
impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't say they weren't meeting just because of that.
Right.
Unfortunately.
But we can't find any connection. Right. For law enforcement, the next step was crucial, obtaining Tudor's DNA to confirm if he was the match. However, they didn't have enough evidence yet to secure a warrant. At the time, Tudor was living alone in Reno, Nevada. Detectives tried to collect a discarded item from his trash, but unfortunately, the trash was in a shared receptacle, which complicated these efforts. Detectives then turned to a new avenue. Cece Moore discovered that Tudor was estranged from his children. His son, John, lived in Newport Beach, California. Cece reached out to local police there, and a detective approached John to ask if he would provide a DNA sample. John's response was telling. "This is about my father, isn't it?"
Oh.
Yeah.
He
That
knew.
doesn't- Yeah. That
Wow.
doesn't bode well.
Mm-mm.
He knew he did something.
His suspicion of Tudor seemed to confirm that John had long harbored doubts about his father. In April 2022, she brought this name to detectives in 2019. It took a long time for them to gather enough to, go ask John. He volunteered the DNA for testing. When the results came back, they confirmed he was the biological child of the man who left his DNA at the scene
Oh, wow.
of Nancy's murder. While this was significant, investigators still needed a sample from Tudor himself. Tudor was 27 at the time of the murder. He was now in his late 70s, 77 almost.
Oh, I thought you said before he was 25.
Oh, yes. The snapshot showed that he was around 25 at the time.
Oh, okay, got it.
So pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. He lived in Reno, Nevada, in a quiet residential neighborhood. Retired from his once prominent legal career, he had settled into a seemingly ordinary life, far removed from the shadows of his past.
That's so not fair.
It's not fair. Her
Not fair
life
that
is...
he got to do that, and
Mhm.
yes,
And all the way till he's
Lived a whole life after doing something so horrendous. Yep.
Yep.
What makes me wonder if there's other things he did that are.
I wonder
Buried.
that too.
Yeah. I mean,
How do you
doesn't
do
seem like
that?
a one and done?
Yeah. How do you do that horrific of a crime and then just go back
live
to your
on the rest of
wife
your life. Yep.
and
Absolutely.
continue on your career?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's anything else that's buried out there.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like his son had a particularly high opinion of his dad. So, I wonder if there were situations at home or things like that,
Well, the thing
Right.
with the girlfriend was when he was 50, right?
Yeah.
So his son would have
Yeah.
known about that.
Yeah. Because he was arrested for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So he probably knows he's got some sketchy background.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. On September 6th, 2022, detectives went to Tudor's Reno apartment with a warrant. When they introduced themselves and explained the purpose of their visit, Tudor's reaction spoke volumes. "Is this legal?" he asked. The detectives assured him that it was, which kind of makes me laugh just because he is a lawyer and he's asking them if it's legal.
Yeah.
Right. And they have the warrant.
They showed him the warrant. You can actually, if you watch the People magazine investigates, they show the body cam footage of the detectives coming to his apartment
Oh, wow.
and clips of that interaction. So they showed him the warrant. He did cooperate, providing his DNA sample. They thanked him, they took photographs, and they left. The DNA results came back just 2 days later, confirming that he was indeed the man who had left the blood evidence at the scene of Nancy's murder. During those 2 days, though, Tudor began acting strangely. On September 8th, 2022, he transferred the title of his car to his neighbor, and then he attempted suicide by overdosing on Tylenol. During the attempt, somehow he also set his apartment on fire, and police and fire department was called really quickly, and the EMTs found him, revived him, and took him to the hospital. I think that it would have been successful if that fire hadn't have started.
I wonder if he had second thoughts.
That's possible.
Did something to try to get.
Well, if he
Help?
set the fire to make sure,
Oh, or yeah.
Getting rid of evidence or something.
or just to make sure that he did die if,
Mm,
if the Tylenol didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
like a second
yeah, I
Yeah.
see what you mean.
attempt, I guess. Or
Yeah. For investigators, this spoke volumes. Was it an admission of guilt? Or was it a desperate act of a man facing, his unraveling of his life that he's constructed all these years? The arrest was methodical, but the moment was heavy with significance. For decades, Nancy Anderson's family had waited for this day. For the detectives involved, it was the culmination of years of effort and unyielding persistence. Chirila reportedly appeared disoriented and defensive during his arrest. He denied any involvement in the crime, maintaining his innocence even as the evidence against him was presented. So he was arrested in the hospital, which if you see his mugshot anywhere, he's in the hospital gown.
oh, okay.
Straight from the hospital, he was transferred to the Reno jail, where his bail was set at $1 million. For Nancy Anderson's family, the news of his arrest was bittersweet. Her mom had passed away without seeing justice for her daughter, but all 9 of her siblings were able to get closure.
A sense of relief for them to finally know.
Absolutely. That's actually exactly what they said. They expressed a mix of relief, but also sadness. They're grateful for the truth that had finally come to light, but heartbroken that her mom hadn't been able to see it.
Yeah.
Nancy's younger sister, speaking to reporters, said, "We've waited so long for this. My mother would have been so relieved to know who did this to her. It's not the ending we wanted, but at least we have answers." So Chirila's background in the legal system became both an asset and a complication. He was no stranger to the courtroom, and his knowledge of the law made him quite the defendant. His attorneys argued against extradition to Hawaii, delaying the process as they sought to challenge the validity of the evidence and the methods used to obtain it. Tudor in court said that he was unlawfully arrested at a Reno hospital after police forced him, and he says by any force necessary, to provide a DNA sample that then tied him to the cold case.
You said they had the body cam footage, though, right?
Yes, I did not see, I didn't see all of the body cam footage, but
Right.
no.
They can, that's something they can check though. Like, all right, let's look at this and see if it was
Absolutely.
excessive force.
Right. And I think it's good that they had that, since he's trying to say, I wonder if he didn't know that they were recording.
Maybe, I don't know.
So he continued in court saying, I think if the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals saw this, they'd throw it right out. They did not.
Thankfully.
Yep. They actually told him, you can take it up with the Honolulu Police Department. We're not even here to talk about that. All we're doing is setting your extradition to Hawaii. And he seemed so narcissistic in his responses, saying, I'd love to go there. Hawaii's beautiful, but not like this. What? The Honolulu Police Department, through all of this, stood firm. They'd waited for decades to bring Nancy's killer to justice, and they weren't about to let these procedural delays derail their case. After months of legal struggling, he was finally extradited to Hawaii on December 2nd, 2022, to face charges of second-degree murder. Chirila's arrest reopened wounds for many who had been touched by Nancy's story. Former detectives who had worked the case in the 1970s spoke of their frustration at not being able to solve it sooner. Forensic experts marveled at the power of DNA technology to bring closure to a case that had once seemed unsolvable. The revelation of Chirila's alleged involvement in Nancy Anderson's 1972 murder sent shockwaves through the communities that once held him in high regard. The juxtaposition of his public service and the horrible crime he was accused of. The juxtaposition of his public service and the horrible crime he was accused of left many grappling with the chasm between his outward persona and the darkness that must have lurked within. After he was extradited to Hawaii, the trial was set to start in February 2023. Bringing a case to trial after nearly 50 years posed significant challenges for the prosecution. Memories fade, witnesses move or pass away, and evidence, no matter how well preserved, can be scrutinized for its chain of custody. Prosecutors in Honolulu knew they needed to construct an airtight case, one that would stand up to Chirila's inevitable defense strategies.
I bet that her family was glad that he hadn't passed away by this time. You know, 'cause that was a definite possibility after 50 years.
Right. Absolutely.
I bet that they, at this point, thought that must be the case. They would never know.
Right. How would we ever connect that?
Exactly.
They thought that in 2003.
Yeah.
The core of the prosecution's argument was the DNA evidence, which linked Chirila to the blood found at Nancy Anderson's apartment. This evidence, prosecutors argued, was the silent witness that had waited decades to speak. They supplemented this with testimony from the genealogists, the forensic experts, and retired detectives who had worked in the original investigation. In pretrial motions, Chirila's defense team was equally determined. They argued that the DNA evidence, while compelling, could not definitely prove that Chirila had committed the murder. They suggested alternate explanations, saying perhaps Chirila had visited Nancy's apartment for just some other reason, and the DNA transfer was unrelated to the crime.
Oh, the bloody towel.
He
came over for
three bloody
first aid.
towels. Right.
Okay.
They also sought to discredit the use of the genetic genealogy, calling it an invasion of privacy and questioning its admissibility in court. And this is, 2022, 2023. There have been so many cases solved this way by now.
Well, and with this one too, they asked permission. They let his son know what they were looking for. They went and told him too. It's not like our last DNA case where they were tricking people.
Right.
Well,
Right.
And they had a warrant too, and they presented him with the warrant.
Yeah.
And talked to him about it. But
Exactly.
Well, I think they're meaning tracking down his son in the first place, finding the DNA that way. I think that's what they're meaning is the invasion of privacy. I think everything else they did, by the book, I think at least they're questioning that initial search.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they already knew who he was, and his son could have sent in his DNA anyways,
Right.
which would have proven a match. As definitely a different course from the last one. The The defense also leaned heavily on the passage of time. They argued that with nearly 50 years between the murder and the trial, reasonable doubt should loom large. They pointed to the lack of direct eyewitnesses and questioned whether the investigation had been thorough enough to exclude other potential suspects. Retired detectives were ready to testify about the original investigation. Their frustration at not solving the case in the 1970s was palpable. But their faith in modern technology to finally deliver justice was inspiring. We knew we had the right evidence, one detective said, but we didn't have the tools to make it speak. Now we do. There were many delays and holdups in this case, and Tudor's life came to an end before he could stand trial. On December 23rd, 2023, while in custody, he was taken to the hospital for end-of-life care. He refused to eat, drink, or take medication, and passed away 2 days later on December 25th, 2023. For Nancy's family, the news was met with mixed emotions. It's not a celebration, her sister said, but maybe now this chapter can finally be closed.
So did they ever find any connection between him and Nancy?
Not that I can find, and I can't get all of the case files yet.
Wow.
Nancy's sister Mary told reporters in a written statement, quote, "As a family, we are somewhat disappointed that he did not live to stand trial. Yet at the same time, we are also at peace knowing it's over. Once he was revealed, he ended up spending the rest of his life behind bars. We may never know the reason why he killed Nancy, if any other co-conspirators were involved, or any other answer surrounding that day. All we know is we got the answer to our principal question: who killed our sister in Honolulu over half a century ago?"
I was gonna say, I kind of wish he would have like confessed at the hospital. He knew he was end of life
Yeah.
care.
Because I mean, it's closure, but also not. Because I think,
Yeah.
okay, his DNA was there, his blood was on the towels, but why?
Why?
Especially if they had no connection,
Yes, that's what I want to know, the why.
Yep.
I kind of wish he would have like, okay, I did do it.
Yes.
And here's why.
Or how he met her, or
Anything.
if he went there that day meaning to do that,
Yeah.
Just some kind of answers.
Mhm. I do think that will come out eventually, maybe when we can get the case unsealed. But it sounds like he denied his involvement to the end, so
Yeah.
maybe not.
Maybe not.
So we may never know on this one either.
Well, we know
We know it was him.
he had 3 blood-soaked towels, but
Yeah, but when I say we may never know, I mean the why.
oh, I see.
And the connection and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. I think if Nancy's family had been living there too, they might have been able to provide a connection because they would have been paying attention more,
Yeah.
to who she's hanging out with, what she's doing, where her roommate Jody, I mean, like I said, they weren't best friends.
Right.
They talked to Jody again. Had she ever seen him?
I was not able to find that because I was interested
That'd
in
be
that too.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or like any of her other friends, if maybe they had hung out together or.
But also 50 years,
No.
So Jody would have been like almost 70 or in her 70s.
Right.
He did, like I say, maintain his innocence to the end. In interviews with his legal team, he claimed that he had been the victim of a flawed system, though he offered no alternate explanation for the DNA evidence that placed him at the crime scene. His refusal to acknowledge his actions left a bitter note for those seeking a fuller understanding of why he committed such an awful, awful act. The autopsy revealed that Tudor died from sepsis caused by urinary tract infection, with contributing factors including tongue cancer, diabetes, a heart condition, and kidney stones. For Nancy's family, his lonely and miserable death, on Christmas no less, felt like justice was finally served. The man who had taken their sister's life so violently met his own end under grim circumstances, bringing a sense of closure to a tragedy that had haunted them for over 50 years. Nancy's family also renewed the family commitment to keeping her memory alive. They worked with local organizations in Michigan and Hawaii to advocate for the preservation of evidence in unsolved cases and to support families that are still waiting for answers. Her brother said, quote, "We don't want another family to go through what we did. If Nancy's case teaches us anything, it's that you should never give up hope," end quote. Nancy Anderson's case became a beacon of hope for cold case investigators and families across the country. Her story highlights the power of persistence and the importance of preserving evidence even when a case seems unsolvable. It also underscored the impact of DNA technology and genetic genealogy in achieving justice. Forensic experts cited the case as an example of how science and dedication can triumph over time. The Honolulu Police Department implemented new protocols for reviewing cold cases, inspired by the success of Nancy's investigation.
That's so great.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's other cases, similar to this that are getting solved
Mhm.
as well.
There are.
Awesome.
It's so exciting.
That's exciting.
Nancy's story also sparked conversations about the ethics of genetic genealogy. While the technique had proven invaluable in solving her case, it continues to raise the same questions about privacy and the balance between technological advancements and individual rights. These discussions, though complex, ensure that her case would continue to influence the future of forensic science. In Hawaii, the resolution of Nancy's case brought a sense of closure to a community that had been haunted by her murder for decades. Local residents, some who had lived in the area at the time of her death, attended a memorial service organized by her family. They shared stories of how her murder had shaken the neighborhood and expressed relief that her killer had finally been identified. Nancy's legacy was also honored in her hometown of Bay City, Michigan. Nancy's case also serves as a voice for victims who can no longer speak for themselves. Through her story, we're reminded of the humanity behind the headlines, the vibrant lives cut short by violence. It's a call to action for communities, law enforcement, and society as a whole to continue advocating for the forgotten and the voiceless. Nancy Anderson was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman with dreams of independence and adventure. Her life, though tragically cut short, has left a lasting impact on her family, on the investigators who pursued justice for her, and on the countless others inspired by her story. As we reflect on her case, we're reminded of how fragile life is and the enduring strength of those who fight for justice. Nancy's story, though rooted in tragedy, is ultimately one of resilience and redemption, a testament to the idea that while time may heal, it is justice that restores. And so we close the book on Nancy's case, not with a sense of finality, but with a sense of purpose. May her story inspire us to keep searching, keep questioning, and above all, keep believing that even the coldest cases can one day be warmed by the light of truth. So what do you guys think?
It's very interesting. I still wish we knew the why, but I'm glad that they were able to catch him before he passed and gave her family that little bit of relief and closure that they were needing.
Just so great that the detectives held on to that evidence for so long and they, preserved it so well that they were able to actually be able to make those connections 50 years later. I mean, that
It's amazing.
yeah, it kind of blows my mind a little bit because, I mean, with how many cases, come and go from a police precinct, it's amazing that they held on to that so well for that long.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Good job, Honolulu Police Department.
Yes,
absolutely.
major kudos.
Yes. I love highlighting these cases that have been solved all these years later with DNA, just to showcase that there's always hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed learning about Nancy Anderson. She seemed like a beautiful individual.
Yeah.
Inside and out. We'll post a picture of her on our blog as well. If you want to learn more about Nancy's case or read any of the resources that we used in writing this case, you can go to our website, crimeclueless.com, go to contributors, and you have a link to all of the information. Also, if you would follow us on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it really helps us out.
At Crime Clueless.
Yes.
Find us there.
Find us at
We're
Crime
everywhere.
Clueless. We're everywhere and all the same, Crime Clueless.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.